Hello, I hope you're doing well. I am just posting this video to make a couple comments on what I saw from your Unit 2 assignment that you did on AP Classroom. So you probably saw that Unit 2 was all of the stuff about linear regression, and it seemed like for most of you, either naturally or from looking stuff up in your book or your notes, that the majority of that linear regression stuff came back to you pretty easily. I did make some individual comments on your AP Classroom page with specific mistakes that you made, but I just want to cite some overarching things that I saw as I made my way through. Again, really nothing that was major, but just some things to help you solidify your understanding of Unit 2 before we move on to reviewing Unit 3 and before you take that test. So the first thing that I noticed was there was a question on there where it asked you to describe. When you are describing a relationship on a scatter plot, you want to describe that using three terms. You want to describe it using the shape. So the shape for you is almost always going to be linear if you're doing something with linear regression, but you need to tell the grader that, and that is where a number of you were missing a piece. So you have to state that that relationship is linear, remembering that not all relationships on a scatter plot are. So you want to state that it's linear. You want to state the direction. So that's essentially saying, does it slope positively or negatively? And then you want to talk about the strength, which is referencing how compact, close together, or far apart are those points that are on the scatter plot. So when it asks you to describe, make sure that you get those three things in there. The next comment that I want to make is about slope. So most of you found the correct slope from the regression analysis that was posted under the scatter plot on, I think it was question 1. With that, you all did a pretty good job of interpreting the slope there. What I want to remind you of is that slope is always an average. So on that question, the slope was 235, I believe. So what you would have wanted to say is that on average, a team would expect 235 more spectators for each additional game that they win. It doesn't mean that they win a game and 235 people have to show up. It's an average. So using the term on average anytime that you describe slope is really going to solidify for the grader that you understand the idea of slope, especially slope with reference to linear regression. With that same problem, there was the part B that asked you to decide whether or not it would be okay to use the scatter plot to make a prediction for 0 wins. And with that, I want you to recall this word, extrapolation. So extrapolation means that you are predicting outside of the known X values. And when I say known X values, that means the X values that were actually gathered when you gathered your data points that created your scatter plot. So those X values on the scatter plot about baseball roughly had a minimum of 60. So if you use that same linear regression line to predict for 0 wins, you are making the assumption that the pattern continues all the way down to 0 wins, even though you really have no reason to know that it does. It might, but you don't know that. So you just want to be really cautious when you are using a scatter plot to predict outside of essentially the known domain, and not use it to make those predictions unless you're pretty close to one of the endpoints. All right, the last thing that I want to talk about is the idea of R, which R is your correlation coefficient. And most of you we're pretty good at remembering what r was and remembering that if you knew r squared, that you could take the square root of it to get r. Just some things to remind you about with r. R really is on a floating scale. -1, 1, and 0 would be in the middle. So when you are at -1, this is a perfect negative relationship, meaning that every single data point is on the line and the slope is negative. If you're at +1, that's a perfect positive relationship. And again, that really means the same thing. It means that every single data point falls on the line and that the slope is positive. Now, for 0 is when you would look at your scatter plot and what you're seeing is definitely not linear. So for 0, you would say no linear relationship. Now, this is what I wanted to remind you of, is that you want to be careful to state, if you're stating that there's a weak or no relationship, that you state that it's a linear relationship. Remember that scatter plots can show other things besides just a linear relationship, but our R value that we are predicting with is only intended for lines. So when you get a low R value, that doesn't mean there's no relationship at all, but it means that that relationship is not likely linear. So these are the comments that I really wanted to make to you about what I saw in your work. If you read my comments on AP Classroom and you have further questions or you feel like you don't understand what I wrote, please let me know and I would be happy to clarify for you. Also, please make sure that as we get closer to the AP exam, if you are feeling nervous about how to type your answers, how to input things, where resources are, anything like that, please make sure that you let me know. I know that maybe some questions will come up for you after you take other exams, and since we're the very last one, you have a lot of time to have things come to the surface. I will continue to check my email even though school is technically out, so just make sure you let me know what you need from me as we get close to that exam. You have an assignment posted. It's a Unit 3 review. So that is posted for you now. You can go and do that, and I will be back with you on next Wednesday with comments about that. So have a great day, and I will talk to you next week.